Hey guys, welcome back to my Practically Imperfect Life. Today's video is part 4 in my curriculum review series. We have already discussed our history and social studies courses, our English courses, our science courses, and now we are on to math. So welcome to my channel, everybody. If you are joining for the first time, my name's Abby. I'm a homeschooling mom of 2 high school age students. And in this video series, I've been going back through the courses that I had my students do for the 2023-2024 school year as a 10th grader and as an 11th grader, what our thoughts are on them, how we've used them, and our overall rating of these different courses. Now, today I'm going to kind of combine both what my son did and my daughter did because they are very similar because they come from the same company, and that is from Shorman Math. My son, who is in 10th grade, is doing the Algebra 2 with Integrated Geometry from Shorman, and my 11th grader is doing Precalculus from Shorman. For those who aren't familiar with Shorman Math, it is an online math program. The video lessons are all online. The textbook, if you can call it a textbook, is online. Reading assignments are online, and they do all of their work online. They might write notes and work out the problems, but they enter in all of their answers online. The testing is online, and it's all auto-graded. And this was a course, well, this was a whole company that I was introduced to a couple of years ago. I saw another homeschooler recommend it, and I thought, oh, auto-graded math, yay! And I was somewhat familiar with Dr. Shorman and his method of teaching. To give a little bit of background, my kids grew up doing Saxon math. That had always been our preferred math program. I liked the Saxon method. I liked that whole idea of spiral learning where you're constantly reviewing previous concepts while learning new concepts in little bite-sized chunks. As they moved up through the Saxon math programs, I felt like they needed a little bit of a video introduction or a video lesson to just start to explain what they were learning a little bit more. And I found the dive tutorials. So the dive tutorials are done by Dr. Shorman, and they're made to go along with specific Saxon math programs. So when my daughter did, for example, Algebra 1 in the 8th grade, she would watch a tutorial from Dive that was done by Dr. Shorman, and it would go along with the lesson that she was doing. So it matched up with the lessons, but it gave different example problems than what she was seeing in the textbook. So it wasn't simply a repetition of what she was already reading in the textbook. It was something new. And I had really liked those. I thought they helped. And we had done really well with the Saxon programs. In fact, my 11th grader did Saxon Geometry her 9th grade year and Saxon Algebra 2 her 10th grade year. But when my son was a freshman, I thought, well, let's try the Shorman Math. Everyone's been raving about it, and it's auto-graded. It's one less thing that I would have to sit there and go through and look at and grade all the time. So we started him off with their Algebra 1 with Integrated Geometry, and that's how Shorman does it. He basically teaches half a year of geometry intermixed with Algebra 1, and then he teaches half a year with Algebra 2. So they do get credit for all 3 math programs over the course of 2 years. And so I thought that made sense. Let's try it. And it went well for my son his freshman year. So going into this year, I thought, well, my daughter is going to be going into pre-calculus, and I knew how incredibly long it took me to grade her geometry in Algebra 2. There were so many different steps to all those problems, and it was taking me a really long time to grade all of her work. And to be honest, the auto-grading function was what really drew me to it. I thought, this will be fantastic. So I had her do the Precalculus by Shorman, and then my son continued on with Algebra 2 with Integrated Geometry. And that's how we got to using it. Now, the way that it is set up is that there are 100 lessons for the year, and interspersed anywhere from like every 3 to 5 lessons, there is a quiz day, and the quizzes are fairly short. And then 4 times a year, there is a quarterly exam. It definitely is not set up to go like 180 days initially. Like if you look at it, it's not set up to go 180 days. What they recommend for their program is that you limit the amount of time your kids spend on it each day. Basically, they say if you're spending longer than an hour and a half on math, you should stop where you're at and pick it up the next day and then continue on. I can tell you that neither of my kids like that idea. Neither one of them wants to stop in the middle of assignment and then come back to it, finish it, and then go into another lesson. My daughter flat out told me, she goes, that sounds stupid. So both of them really just did a full lesson every day, or if it was a quiz day, they just did the quiz. If it was a practice exam day, they just did the practice exam. They basically just did one full thing a day, regardless of how long it took them. And I think to some degree, I mean, I understand where they were coming from. They just didn't want to space things out over multiple days. But I also know that there were days where they spent a ridiculous amount of time finishing an assignment. So that could be part of why they give it the review that they do. But when you go into a lesson, it starts with a video that you watch. And the video lengths vary. The first couple of weeks of both of their programs do quite a bit of review. And so those videos are long, like long. The way they explain it is that while those videos are long, because they're reviewing a lot of material on one day, the assignment shouldn't take as long because it's supposed to be review material and your students should work through it quicker. But then as you're getting into new concepts, the video lessons are shorter because they're only introducing one new concept, but then it might take them longer to do the assignment because it's a new thing that they're learning and it's going to take them longer to work out the problems. That is how it's presented. In reality, it just kind of always took them a long time. Easily an hour and a half a day. Easily. Every single day, except for quiz days. Quiz days, the quizzes are short, so they would get through those in about 15, 20 minutes, and then they'd be done with math. And they were always excited when it was a quiz day because they knew math wasn't going to take forever. Now, in addition to the video lesson, there is also a link on that lesson to a portion of a textbook, and it's all online. That textbook is online. You can print it out if you really wanted to, but it'll basically link them to the section that they're supposed to read. Then they get into the practice problems. The way the course is designed is your student is supposed to go through and work out the problems. They should be writing them out on paper and showing their work and, figuring out the problem. If they need help, there's a link above the question that will take them to an example problem. And if needed, back to either the textbook or the video lesson that problem pulls from for them to re-watch it. They answer the question and then it lets them know if they got it right or wrong. If they get it wrong, a quarter of a point is deducted, and then they can guess again. And basically, at whichever point they get it right, that's how many points they get. So if they miss the answer once, they get 3/4 of a point. If they miss it twice, they get half a point. Miss it 3 times, and so on. Now, there's a couple of things that both of my kids said have been issues this year. First of all, they said that the lessons are just long. The videos are long, and I mean, while Dr. Sherman teaches well, my son said his voice kind of makes me sleepy. And I don't know what to say about that. It's not, you're not watching him teach. It's basically like a digital blackboard and you're watching him work out the problems and talk over them. I didn't really know what to tell my son about that other than, well, then you have to put yourself in a situation where you can pay attention, sitting up in your chair, making sure that we have lights on, that we're not trying to sit and do our math like on the couch where, it's really easy to like nod off if you're not feeling fully engaged. Sometimes that's just how it rolls. I had lots of really boring college math classes where I remember kind of feeling the same, but you still have to pay attention. The other thing is that the way that you answer the questions is really important. It tends to specify if it wants answers, rounded with no decimals as a whole number. It gives you some guidance on how you're supposed to answer these questions because it is auto-graded. So if you enter in that answer and it's not entered in exactly the way they want it to be answered, it's going to count it wrong. And you have to pay attention to that. If you're pretty sure you have the right answer, but maybe you just didn't type it in exactly in the format they want, you might second guess yourself unless you pay attention to the instructions, which tell you specifically how to answer that question. Sometimes I feel like it's stupid stuff, to be honest. Like if you have to give an answer and then the units, if you put like a space between the number and the units, it might count it wrong, or vice versa. Where I'm like, but the answer is correct. It's just whether or not you put a space in or didn't put a space in. I get it to a degree. It's kind of the way that these autograded things have to work. You know, it's got to have a specific answer in there that it's checking. But it is frustrating for my kids because they might, again, accidentally put that space in there, get the answer wrong, and then they've missed a part of a point even though they had the correct answer. And so that has been kind of frustrating for both of them in that regard. Now, when they get to the end of an assignment, they submit it, and then the grade is put into their grade book, and I get an email alert each time they submit an assignment. That is nice in case I'm working on something else and I want to just verify that they've gotten their math done for the day. I just can look for that quick email telling me that that assignment has been submitted. So that is a good thing for just me being able to stay on top and making sure that they've done all of the things that they needed to do for that day. Another thing that's been kind of an issue is the fact that, and I think this is more so with my daughter than my son. My son said that when it comes to the examples that are given for the individual problems, he doesn't always feel that they're particularly helpful. He said sometimes the example is somewhat similar to the problem, and I'm talking about the examples that are linked above the problem. So let's say it's problem 1, you're reading it, you're not quite sure how you're supposed to set up that problem, so you click the little link that takes you to a sample. He said sometimes that sample problem is helpful, like it shows you how to set up the problem you're supposed to actually answer. And he said sometimes it just doesn't seem to help or match up, and he's not quite sure what to do. My daughter had a similar comment with precalculus, and in fact, in her case, she said that it was an almost all the time thing. Like she just very rarely felt like the sample problems helped her in any great degree. And it caused her a ton of frustration because she really struggled with precalculus. I don't know if it's precalculus as a subject overall or if it's how it was presented in this, but she struggled more with this math class than I have seen her struggle with any other math that she had done. I mean, she easily got A's in algebra, geometry, and algebra 2. And precalculus has been her own personal nightmare. And I feel so bad because I so badly wanted to be of help to her. But for the longest time, it was difficult for me to be of help to her because there were a lot of things that I just haven't done math-wise in years and years and years. And I had to sit there and read through those sample problems and read through the textbook and watch parts of the videos to feel like I could help her. My son, math tends to come fairly easy to him. He didn't have much in the way of struggles with his course. He's neutral about it. I asked him what he thought about it. I said, hey, I'm going to give a ranking. Can you tell me what you think of it? And he's like, well, I guess it's okay. Which, I mean, I guess I don't expect him to be like, oh, it's the greatest math program known to man. But he really didn't have much in the way of saying, well, this is great, or in saying this was terrible. He was just kind of neutral about it. It might be smoother for him simply because he's got several years of working with this program versus my daughter, who had never done an all-online math program, so it was a total switch for her. She, like I said, she really didn't like the sample problems. She didn't feel like they helped her all that much. The other specific things that frustrated her, there is a lot of work that requires a good understanding of unit circles and what they're telling you and how they work. But she didn't feel like she was adequately taught that in the course. In fact, we had to start to look at outside resources to help her better understand the unit circle. I even went so far as to order several books that talked about it and had diagrams and things to help her gain a better understanding of that. The other thing that she was really frustrated about was how much it expected her to know. Even in the textbook and in some of the lessons, She said it would at times say, well, you should already know this, and it would skip over some concept and then go into something else. And she's like, but I don't know this. I don't remember learning this. And I think it might have been things that maybe are taught in previous Sherman math programs that are, that you're expected to know for this one, and that maybe aren't covered in the same way in other math curriculum. She had similar concerns regarding the use of calculators. So graphing calculators are used pretty extensively in pre-calculus. The graphing calculator that I believe they use in the program is a different one than the one we have. So we have like one of the TI-83 or TI-84 graphing calculators, which is still a really expensive calculator. But they use a different one. And when it did give instructions for what to enter into a graphing calculator, they didn't match up with what her calculator had. And there would be a lot of problems where it would say, enter this into your calculator and then, graph the answer and find this, find that. But it didn't say how to do that on the graphing calculator. It didn't say what settings you needed to have or where you needed to go. There was no tutorial on how to use the graphing calculator the way that they wanted you to do it. And I talked about this, I think several months ago, about how I finally went and I created like a whole YouTube playlist for her of videos talking about how to do different things on the graphing calculator, because we had to figure that out almost on a daily basis. And that was so frustrating for her because she wanted to be able to answer these questions, but she had no clue how she was supposed to do it on the graphing calculator. And again, that required me to like look it up and figure out how we were going to do this and then teach it to her. And I really feel like that's something that they kind of missed the ball on. I really think they could include maybe even like some early lessons, like before you even jump into any of the new math, talking about graphing calculators and how to use them and the different functions, or have that included more in the curriculum, and possibly be very specific when people buy this course on which graphing calculator you think they should have. I think that would have made a world of difference and would have eliminated a lot of frustration on her part. I also feel like they could have done a better job of teaching, again, the unit circle and the concept of the unit circle and how it works and what it's telling you. I think that is another big thing that impacted her over the course of multiple weeks, like not having that full understanding and then us needing to find outside resources to teach it. Now, some pros of this curriculum. First of all, again, it's all online. So there's no huge textbook and it is auto-graded. And that is nice to a degree because I can look on there and I can see what they scored on an assignment, with the little caveat that about halfway through the year, I started going back through their lessons because they were letting me know about things like, oh, hey, I accidentally put a 0.0 when I wasn't supposed to include the decimal, but the rest of the answer was right. And I want to make sure I give them credit for that, because to me, that's not worth giving, losing a quarter of a credit or half a credit for simply because you typed something in with like an extra decimal, or you put a space between the number and the unit and things like that. I want to give the credit for that. And the only way I can do that is by going back through and looking at their problems and what they missed and then manually adjusting it. But for the most part, it gives them that instant feedback. They can see right away if they got a problem wrong, and then they can make another attempt. The way that the course is designed is that if they get a question wrong, they are supposed to look at the example. They're supposed to look at the book, they're supposed to look at the video, and if they're still completely stuck on a problem after that, they're supposed to email Dr. Shorman for some guidance. Now, when you send a help email, it's like this whole long form you have to fill out, and you have to put on there, it asks, did you look at the video? Did you look at the example problem? Do you have your notes all the way written out? And in some cases, it wants you to scan their notes and show that, so that way he can look and see how they were solving the problem and where they went wrong. And I don't think we ever actually did that, because it just was a huge amount of hassle to ask for guidance on a single problem. What I finally did is I emailed the Sherman helpline, and I was talking about the concerns I was having with my daughter's course, and how I really wish I had access as a parent to a solutions manual. I had always purchased the solution manuals that went along with our Saxon math, and they would show every single step to solve every single problem. And it was great because oftentimes if either one of my kids was stuck on something, it was one particular step of a problem that had them stuck. I could look and quickly see where that was at, and I could give them a little guidance to help them get the rest of the way through the problem. And for problems I wasn't super familiar with, it did break it down all the way, which was also helpful just for me to kind of remember how to do some of that math. The solutions are provided with Shoreman, but only after they submit an assignment for grading. So once they've submitted it and that grade has been entered in the gradebook, then they can open up a PDF that shows them the solutions. Well, that's great for going back through and seeing what you did wrong on a problem and making that correction. It's absolutely no help if you're a parent and you're trying to assist your kid through their math assignment. So I guess it really depends on how hands-on you would like to be with math, how much you want to be helping your students through the course of those problems, and how much you want them to just handle it on their own. Because they could just get to a point where they can't answer all of the problems, and then they do all of those steps and they email Dr. Sherman and you wait for a response back, and then maybe they finish it the rest of the way. My guess is that more often than not, if a student got to a point where they were that frustrated with a problem, they would probably just guess until it got right or until they lost all the points for that problem, because I don't see a whole bunch of teenagers feeling particularly motivated to fill out a form requesting help and having to fill out all those questions and upload all that stuff along the way. That's just my personal opinion. Maybe there are some students out there who actually, find that helpful and want to do that. I think that's probably something that's fairly similar to what you'd see in college, where if you're really stuck, you'd email your professor or you'd arrange to go in and talk to your professor, but I don't know. I just really would have preferred having access to that solution manual far earlier in the year. Like I said, they did send it to me once I requested it, and I explained why I felt like I needed it. And once I had that, the last 8 weeks of pre-calculus, it was like a whole different ball game, because my daughter would ask for help with a problem. She'd say, "Hey, I'm totally stuck." I would take a look at the problem and the solution in the solution manual, and then I'd go over and we would talk through the problem and help her figure it out as she's going through that lesson. And it just made pre-calculus so much smoother. So much smoother. Now, as I said, both of my kids had a couple of similar concerns or complaints about the program, and there were pros that applied to both of them. But my ranking on these is really based off what their individual experiences are, and I think less about the course themselves. My son's course, the Algebra 2 with Integrated Geometry, I would probably rank that at about a 3.5. I think algebra is taught well in it. I had watched some of the lessons with my son. I've seen the types of problems. I think that it's addressed well and taught well. And he's had much fewer issues with the course overall. And again, he feels pretty neutral about it. He's not in love with it, but he doesn't hate it. And when I asked him about whether or not he'd want to stick with the Sherman math for next year, he said, I guess. And I think his experience is so different because he started with Algebra 1 with Sherman. And so as he's going through this program, he's building upon the things as Dr. Sherman taught them in the previous course. For my daughter, who had, I think this was her worst math year if you asked her. I think this was just the year that she abhorred math, which I feel sad about, but she did make it through the whole course. She's all done with it for the year. Probably, if she was to rank it, she'd give it a 1 star. She just disliked it immensely. I would probably say maybe closer to a 2.5, 3. Again, largely based on her experience. The things that I felt like the course were missing were information on that unit circle, information on how to use the calculator, access to the solution manual for us as parents, the amount of time and effort it took to, be able to get additional help on problems. I think those are all just kind of detriments to the course. I think that those are things that could be tweaked in the future in order to make it easier. I also strongly feel like if you're going to use the Sherman math, it would be better to get into it as early as possible. She did Saxon for all of those previous years, and I really feel she would have had a much better year and much less frustration if I had just chosen to do a Saxon pre-calculus or advanced mathematics course. It would have been more what she was used to. We would have had the same resources available. We could have used the dive tutorials for it. I think that was an error on my part, choosing to do such a big switch up for her this late in the game. My son, on the other hand, has been using Sherman for a couple of years, and I think he will do much better going into the pre-calculus course next year, simply because of that experience, and also because I've learned all of these things from going through this with my daughter. I know that we're going to need to spend some outside time focusing on certain topics. I know I'm going to have to get a different calculator. I know I'm going to have to spend some time teaching him how to use it in different functions. Like I've learned all of that from going through it with her. I just feel really bad as her mom that she had to kind of be the test student for all of that, and we had to learn all of that the hard way with her. So my son's experience with it will be far different than hers was. Now, as far as what my daughter is going to be doing with math beyond that, neither one of my kids are going to require calculus for what they hope to study in college. And so we, instead of doing a course here at home, she's going to be doing some dual enrollment next year for math. And that she'll be doing specific math courses that her degree require. So she's very happy to be done with it for this year. And my son just remains very neutral. So I don't know, this might seem like a bit of a bummer of review, but you're not going to love every homeschool curriculum you choose, and the curriculum might work well for one of your students and not for the other. And it might vary based on timing, as it did with my two students. I don't want you to take away that Sherman math is terrible, because it's not. There are a lot of good things about the program, and there's a reason why I had my son do it 2 years in a row, because I liked the way it was teaching him, and I liked how he was learning. I feel like pre-calculus specifically, there were just quite a few missing pieces that could be different. And again, the timing, making that big of a switch for my daughter that late in the game. But we live and we learn, and we figure out what will work best for them next year. So thank you so much for joining me for this curriculum review video. We have one more still to go, and that will be where we review our elective courses. So be sure to hit that subscribe button so that way you can be notified when those videos come out. As always, thanks so much for joining me today, guys. Happy homeschooling, and I'll see you in the next one.